I'm learning that a lot of our viewers fall asleep to these. Well, if that's your thing, sweet dreams. Do you realize the perfect job doesn't exist? I studied economics and am an economist fulfilling his dream of working with big capitals. The problem is that I don't like living in the city. The whole thing about the noise, the people in a hurry, and the polluted air is not really my cup of tea. So I live in the suburbs in a beautiful house with a garden about 1.5 hours from my job. Commuting, even though I drive a fancy car, is the most annoying part of my job. Not even all the comfort of my BMW Class 7 could make up for that 1.5 hours of driving in the dark to reach my house. But that night was particular in many ways. For starters, I was coming home 2 hours later than I did every day. Secondly, the road was unusually foggy. Thirdly, I was working on a big project and my mind was completely taken by it. It was my second day sleeping only 4 hours to meet the deadline, but the particularities of that night were just getting started. I was driving on the usual road with my fog lights on and I could see where I was going, but not much more. Suddenly, and out of nowhere, a car came on the road ahead of me. I hit the brakes, but not hard enough not to hit the other vehicle from behind. Although I crashed the vehicle's trunk, I managed to come almost to a full stop before the hit and didn't do any significant harm to the other car or mine. Nevertheless, I put the car in park and got down to talk to the person I had just hit. My leather shoes became dirty with the mud and my corporate suit was completely inadequate for the time of the day or the place we were at. I approached the other car, but it was completely empty. I was in awe. If it just came on the road, how could it be empty? Where was the driver? I stayed and looked around to see if I could find someone and at least apologize and exchange the insurance information. After about 5 minutes of being idle next to the abandoned car, I walked back to my car. I noticed there were some red stains on the windows in the front part of the other car. It must be an old paint job or something, I remembered thinking, not making much of it. I sped up until I reached the 85 miles per hour speed limit and put the car into cruise speed so I could relax my feet. After something like 10 minutes, the foggy road showed me a man walking on the side of the road. We're talking about literally the middle of nowhere, close to midnight on a foggy night. Whoever he was far from being safe where we were. I don't usually stop to help people in my car because most people feel intimidated by my social status. I don't come from a wealthy family. I managed to change my stars thanks to the effort my parents made for me. It's true that when I started working, I amassed quite a fortune with my eye for details and investments, but I know what it's like to walk for miles because I couldn't afford a bus ticket. I slowed down and lowered the tinted windows to ask if everything was okay. He was too far to be the occupant of the car I had just hit. Is everything okay? Do you need a ride? Leave me alone. The man's response came from somewhere lower than the lungs and the diaphragm. He had this beyond the grave low-pitched voice that was scary to just listen to. I couldn't see his face because it was covered with a hoodie. I insisted. Seriously, I'm going to the next town. Would you like me to drop you there? Seriously, you don't understand English? I said, leave me alone. I was dubious if I should continue offering a ride or respect the man's decision, so I tried one last time. Are you sure you don't need a ride? It's kind of dangerous walking on such a foggy day. I'm not afraid. Take your fancy car and drive on. I said no. Before I finally rolled the window up, I noticed he had his hands stained with something red as well as his face. His eyes were opened wide and he looked like he had just been through hell. I got home and worked until I fell asleep, forgetting about the man in the hoodie completely. The most disturbing thing about that night, though, came the next morning when I saw the news. The police found a car stalled on the road with a corpse inside the trunk. I couldn't believe the car was the one I crashed into. The police were looking for all the information they could find, so I stopped by the police station before work that day. Sitting down in front of the cops, telling them what I'd seen that night, the policeman said, "Do you realize you might have invited a murderer inside your car last night?" A rush of fear came down my spine, and I'm sure I got pale as paper. He was right. God only knows what would have happened to me if that guy said yes to riding with me. Since that night, I decided to hire a chauffeur, and I'm no longer driving that road. Still, I could very well be dead by now. My dad's Ford Falcon. I commute by train, take buses to go around the city, and fly whenever I have a long distance to go. Although I travel like that most of the time, whenever I have a chance, I take out my classic American muscle car and go for a long drive with my wife. I own a '69 Ford Falcon. It's a sports edition, so it has a monster V8 engine that roars like a wild lion, king of the jungle. Well, that's exactly how I feel whenever I step on the gas with the top down and the wind in my hair. The car was my dad's. He was a rockabilly freak with a high hairdo and two-color shoes, blasting the Stray Cats in the stereo every Saturday afternoon. His puffy dice still hang from the rearview mirror. Well, I inherited the car and loved driving it, mostly all night long and mostly in the desert. That night, we were doing just that, going across the desert holding hands and listening to music. The scene was kind of cinematic. We were going fast and the full moon was our only companion. The road seemed infinite in front of us and the stars completed a beautiful landscape. I just love seeing the sunrise when dawn comes along, but my favorite is the pitch black scenery and the warm desert air. That night, though, we weren't going to make it to dawn because a series of uncanny events were coming our way. The first was a weird noise coming from straight above us. It was something that resembled an engine. We could see nothing. The evening was calm and the noise became increasingly annoying. Well, I wish it would have been kept at annoying, but it would soon turn into terrifying. We must have made at least 50 miles with that noise over our heads. We couldn't see anything, so we pumped up the music to get rid of the noise. To our surprise, the noise became louder and nearer, so I slowed down the car and killed the music to try and figure out what was making such a huge noise. We were already scared to our bones when the helicopter above our heads turned the lights on. A huge white glow flooded our car and we looked at each other in awe. We went from a road movie to a sci-fi movie in a fraction of a second. I tried speeding up, but outracing a helicopter is something that no car can do, not even my almighty Falcon with its roaring V8 engine. So I decided to give up, plan B, and slow down. Suddenly, to my right, a country road opened up and I maneuvered the car out of the main highway. It was in very bad shape and it hurt me to put my completely restored vehicle through that test. I was far more scared about the light over our heads than the immaculate rims. The road was half paved and half dirt, but I managed to have a strong grip on the wheel and keep it going forward. My wife Sally was grabbing the armrest and looking ahead. She just screamed, "Go, go, go," as we were venturing into the darkness. The light above our heads followed our moves, and I stepped on the gas in such a way the car would either fall apart or shake them from our tail. The chasing and the adventure worked until the helicopter came closer and flew almost over the pavement, forcing me to stop the car to avoid hitting the back propeller that was turning very fast close to the car's hood. Finally, we stopped the car and witnessed the spectacle of a helicopter landing in front of us. It was all a cloud of dust and the dirt stuck to our skin, while we protected our eyes with one arm and held hands with the other. The helicopter turned off the engine so the dust could stop flying. I never turned off the car. 3 men in suits came down from the helicopter. One of them, the only one who wasn't the size of Conan the Barbarian, said, "Why did you escape us?" "I don't know, I was scared." "Who are you? What do you want?" "Let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Mark Renner." "Nice to meet you, but I still don't know who you are." "Mark Renner who? What do you want with us?" "I'm Mark Renner. I'm a neuroscientist. I have a doctorate in human behavior. We need you to come with us. We need volunteers for an experiment in our lab." "I'm sorry, Dr. Renner, but we're not going anywhere." I felt my wife's grip in my hand becoming stronger. We had this ethereal connection since day one, and I think it's a side effect of love. As the huge men who accompanied the doctor took a step forward, we instinctively ran to the car. My wife jumped over the door and landed on her back in the passenger seat. As I put my foot on the gas so hard, I was almost reaching the engine. The car complained but obeyed, and I used our power to break the back propeller that was off and still. They were going nowhere without the tail helix. Immediately after we passed the helicopter, we took a U-turn and went back to the main road, speeding up all the way without looking back. As soon as we made it to the first hotel, we parked and asked for a room. Sitting on the bed, we looked Dr. Renner up on Google, and it turned out he was indeed a neuroscientist surrounded by great controversy for his experiments on human volunteers. We were about to be involuntary volunteers for God knows what kind of crazy testing. I think that experience, which looked like the scene of a sci-fi movie, made us even closer with each other and with our vehicle. It's been in my family for generations. It will continue to save and change our lives for many more, I hope. The Conans. The world reduces to the pavement, the white line in the middle, and the pitch black surroundings. I love those moments. It's just me, the road, and my truck cruising the world playing some good old rock and roll. I was blasting Motley Crue in my stereo and sitting comfortably as I sang the lyrics and crossed the country for the 3rd time that month. There wasn't anything special about that particular evening, no fog, rain, or snow, yet I could never anticipate what was ahead of me that night. I was feeling low on batteries. When that happens, I better crank some hard rock and start singing so I can avoid feeling sleepy. There's something about the chainsaw-like guitar that keeps my blood pumping straight to the brain. I had a little over 2 hours to go before my destination, the Golden Inn, a cool run-down little hotel that the company paid for and was comfortable enough to spend the night. I used to drive a small truck that didn't have sleeping facilities within, which was better for me. I always thought sleeping in a parking lot was kind of dangerous. Plus, I could really use a shower. Suddenly, in my peripheral vision, I could see a light. It came from behind the truck, but oddly enough, it was a single light. It was a motorbike and it was coming at full speed. I was listening to Motley Crue, so a motorcycle appearing from nowhere was nothing strange. It passed me as if I was not accelerating, and I could see a skull-shaped red light in front of me right between the truck's lights. The rider's leather jacket had a sign on the back saying that it was a member of a riders club. I smiled. Motorcycle riders are always welcome on my road, especially when they wear leather jackets and belong to a club. A second light came on the rearview mirror, then a third, and a fourth. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by a pack of motorcycle riders. I wanted to show them I was a rocking driver too, so I pumped up the volume and lowered the truck's windows to let them hear my music. This was around 2 in the morning, and I was sure they were on their way back from seeing a band or something. Somehow, in my head, I was suddenly surrounded by like-minded people, friends of some kind. The trucker job is a really lonely one, so they were more than welcome. But things started getting a little weird when they slowed down. The bikes that were ahead, right between the truck's lights, did the sign, and the whole pack lowered the speed, which forced me to lift my foot from the gas and hit the brakes softly. When I got out of the truck, the dry air was still warm, but there was nothing around us. Not a single trace of civilized life as far as the eyes could see. It was just us, my new friends and me, crossing America with a rocking soundtrack propelling us forward. The first thing that got my attention was that they were all riding big Harleys. I could only dream of having one of those back then, my absolute dream. I was smiling as I approached the group of riders and was expecting them to smile at me and share some cool road anecdotes and maybe a song or two. The one who turned around and spoke to me did it through a device on the helmet that distorted the voice. "Hand me the keys, mister," the rider said. I took a step back, but was too far away from the door to get on the truck again, so I stayed on the spot. "I left them in," I said, being very scared but very angry at the same time. Nobody was going to rob me of my life's work. That truck had cost me blood, sweat, and tears, and I wasn't going to just give it up, you know? I had a big metal bar that I used to check the tires hidden between the truck and the trailer. It was my only chance. The music had shifted to Iron Maiden, and I could see them moving their helmets up and down with the kick drum and the killer guitars. I walked back telling the person with the helmet to just jump on the truck, that the keys were in the ignition. As I came closer to the truck, I counted the people around me. There were 3 drivers surrounding me. I knew I had to aim for the helmets. That was the best way to knock them off without hurting them. Oh, I forgot to say I used to be a rugby player, and I'm by no means a small guy. I'd much rather fit on the other side of the spectrum. I'm a big dude. The moment the spokesperson of the group reached out to the door's handle, I used a single movement to take out the big metal bar and land it on the helmet. It hit the door, making a loud metal noise and leaving a big dent on the door. I must confess that the mark on the truck's door made me a little angry, and hitting the rest with the bar wasn't a difficult thing. After all, I was at least 10 inches taller than them. I will never forget the sounds of Thin Lizzy and the sun coming up on the horizon as I waited for the cops in the middle of the desert. It turned out they were a band that had already stolen several trucks on that same road. The leather jackets said the Conans on their backs. They were all taken under custody along with their Harleys. Now, whenever I cross the country on my own bike, I can still remember that distorted voice and the loud noise when it hit the truck's door. I bought it with insurance money, so in a way, my new group of friends did help me. They're all behind bars for Grand Theft Auto now, and I hope they stay there for a long time.